I need some light. Oh, this light, okay. There we go, that's better. Now I got light. Let there be light. Good morning, everyone. If everyone would please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence for the people in Oklahoma. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Moment of silence, please. Thank you. Well, we're here today at this emergency preparedness conference, and I don't think anything brings it home more than what we've been watching the last day or so on television in Oklahoma. And particularly for me, it's very, very close because I was texting back and forth. My son and his family lives about 40 miles north of Tulsa, and they were right in the middle of that very dangerous area, so that's been a real worry for myself and my family. But they're fine. As of this morning, they were fine. So anyway, welcome to our annual Emergency Preparedness Conference. And you all know we hold this conference normally in September, but Marty Palugi said, why the hell are we holding this thing in September during hurricane season when we should prepare for it in May and June, or in June before it starts? And he was absolutely right. And when he brought it to my attention, I said, okay, we're gonna change that. So, you know, we wanted to hold this conference before the start of, again, the 2013 hurricane season on June 1st to reinforce the importance of being prepared and share the lessons that we've learned from Hurricane Sandy. We all know how devastating that was, and I will tell you now, and I'm sure those state officials that are here will also tell you just how devastating that storm was. At the same time, although we had significant damage here in Cape May County, it was nothing like Monmouth, Ocean County, the northern towns, Long Island, and I'm on the President's Sandy Task Force Recovery Team, and I've met in New York and Newark, and I have on June 6th, I have a conference in Washington. I can tell you here that we were extremely fortunate in the county of Cape May, even with the damage that we had. 2 days after that storm, Will Morey and I flew over Ocean and Monmouth County, and I never could have imagined the amount of destruction that we saw when we were flying over there. It looked like a bombing run, to be very honest. I'm a Air Force veteran, and definitely that's what it looked like. It was so just devastating, terrible. And I kept saying during that flight to Will Morey, where do you begin? How do you start? If you would have seen that damage, I just I couldn't comprehend at that period of time just where you start to recover from a terrible tragedy like that. I'd like to just recognize some of the people that are here. First, I want to recognize Mr. Chris Jones and the class of the Communications and Arts Technology from Cape May Tech here. And there they are smiling in the back there that are going to be recording our conference today. Also with us today, and I'm sure I missed some people, but we have Prosecutor Taylor with us, Bob Taylor, who's very, very active with Homeland Security and disaster control. I tell you, we meet every month. We have Dale Foster, the county engineer. We have Kevin Thomas, the director of health. We have Beth Bazzelli, who's the clerk of the board, is here. So we'll just get on with this and start. Our first speaker is no stranger to emergency management in Cape May County. He's been my personal friend for more than, I don't know how many years, but he was young at one time. Been the mayor of Avalon for over 20 years. He's been very proactive in the role as in emergency management. Marty was appointed to the Cape May County Coordinator of Emergency Management last year. And his first major storm was Sandy. So he walked right into it. And Marty will talk about the Office of Emergency Management and lessons learned that we learned from Sandy. Marty?
Thank you, Jerry. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Like the director said, I started last year, and then I was the new guy until October 29th, and then we got an education real quick. But I think what the director also touched on was the fact that we were very lucky in Cape May County. We were lucky compared to what our cousins in the northern part of the state got. And I'd like to start out my presentation to just try to remind people and to show them how lucky we really were. Now, this is not a mistake. This is Hurricane Sandy in Ocean County, not Cape May County. We found a lot of problems just before the storm with people becoming very complacent because of Hurricane Irene. Forecasts are 20 times, 100 times better today than they were 20 years ago. And we've seen it between Hurricane Irene and Hurricane Sandy, how accurate those forecasts have been. They've been right on the money with those storms, right down to the last few hours before the storm hit. But we had a lot of complacency in Cape May County. A lot of people didn't evacuate. And just showing you some of the aerial views, Congressman Lobiondo grabbed me the Thursday after the storm and the director and put us in a Coast Guard helicopter. We flew the entire coast. And from Brigantine north, it looked like an entire different state. It was unbelievable. But there's the infamous roller coaster pier up in Seaside Heights that sort of gave a black eye to the whole Jersey coast during the storm. This is a new inlet that opened up in the borough of Mantoloking. That inlet was not there before. And it's quite obvious that they had a series of what they call a nodal erosion zone, that the current came in from the storm and it broke in two directions and broke an inlet right through the middle of the island. There was also another minor inlet that started to break through on the western side. You can see it over here. And within this whole area, there were 32 homes completely gone due to the storm. The borough of Mantoloking, by the way, lost over 65% of their tax rateables. I think there was an article in today's Atlantic City Press that talks about the federal money that they're going to be able to use as a one-time revenue source in their budget just to get by, just to run the town and try to get it back into some type of normalcy. That house wasn't built there, by the way. It washed out into the middle of Barnegat Bay. And in Ocean Beach, I'd like to just point out there's been a lot of controversy and a lot of unknowns about the new federal flood elevation standards that are going to be probably law within another 2 years. It'll be firmed up. But as you can see, out of the 47,000 homes that were partially or totally destroyed in the state of New Jersey, almost 85% of them were the old type construction. Everything built on slab, everything built on grade. That's where the problem is. That's where the major numbers for these emergencies are so much higher. I think you're going to see Hurricane Sandy is going to be classified probably the second most costliest storm in the country after Katrina. But you can see the type of construction that was on the majority of the islands up there, and that's why it's so important that FEMA, to protect public health, safety, and welfare, has to going to be strong with some of the new federal flood regulations, and the municipalities are going to have to abide by it. Ortley Beach was another major problem that had a lot of the older style construction that was built on grade, no pilings. This is one of the main reasons we tell people, please don't drive around in standing water. There were over 47 sinkholes that were developed on all of Long Beach Island during the major part of the tide. Storm sewers collapse, sanitary sewers collapse, water mains will rupture and wash out the road, and with 3 feet of water, it's hard to see where you're driving. That's why we tell people, do not drive through standing water. Seaside Heights Boardwalk. It's kind of obvious that they knew before the storm because they figured the ocean view was a lot better than putting up dunes. So depends on how they look at it now and how they rebuild. The other biggest problem during the storm and the day after the storm were major fires, structure fires. There were not as many, not as bad in Cape May County. There were 2 structure fires, I believe, in Sea Isle City, 1 or 2 in North Wildwood. The biggest problem with gas leaks between the Avalon, Stone Harbor, and Sea Isle City fire departments. They made over 47 calls for gas leaks within the day and the day after the storm. In Brick Township alone, there were 109 structure fires. That's the biggest problem during the height of the storm, when the roads have 3-4 foot of water and the wind's blowing for 70, 80 miles an hour. Those fire crews and those first responder crews are not going to be able to even get to the structure. And in the case of Brick Township, there was about 12 blocks that the fire started at one end, and it was like dominoes. It just went down the whole island. Now we're going to talk about Cape May County and a lot of the things that we learned from Hurricane Irene and what we learned from Hurricane Sandy. Every time there's an event, we learn something new. You can plan and drill, and something new is always going to come up. One of the things we did this based on Hurricane Irene is the county emergency management opened up 4 shelters. The days of evacuating the entire county are gone. We opened up a shelter in Woodbine Developmental Center, the 2 Upper Township schools, and the middle elementary school. We've got a memo of understanding that we just signed about 2 months ago with the Upper Township schools. Before that, we put this whole program together in about a month. It was sort of fly-by-night, but we managed to put over 700, almost 800 people in shelters during the height of the storm. We enhanced and worked with the ESF system, which is a federal program that was put into place about 3 years ago. The county adopted last summer, we adopted our emergency operating plan, is what they call the emergency support function. The way that's been organized, and we used that during the storm within the EOC, rather than bring in all of the different communities to try to talk and work out their problems with the storm. We relied on the ESF functions. Communications was a big change this time with the local municipal coordinators. We put in, about a day before the storm, we put in a separate email address that the 16 municipal coordinators could contact the EOC, and we could email back and forth if we had problems with phone lines. We put in a lot of additional callers in the EOC. And some of the lessons we learned from Sandy are, we know that because of the complacency of Irene, we probably only had about a 50% evacuation rate on the Barrier Islands. It was a major problem. We knew after the first tide, and when it didn't go out, we said the second tide, we're going to start getting the phone calls. Come get me, which we did. The EOC was flooded within the last few hours of the storm for people looking to get rescued that they couldn't get out of their home. We know the next time we're going to need more shelters because I think people are going to heed the warning. We're looking at pre-deploying assets all over the county. We've, since the storm, we've stockpiled Red Cross supplies in the county warehouse. We have over 2,000 blankets. We have medical supplies. We have the food rationing supplies that we're bringing in, and we're going to be stockpiling those things all over the county for the next time. The National Guard changed its mission. We found that out the day before the storm. The National Guard will not pre-deploy high-wheel vehicles in the county anymore. They're supposed to be mission-specific. So I said to them, you mean when we call up that afternoon and we say we have a structure fire in Sea Isle City and there's 4 foot of water in the street, you're going to send a truck down from Trenton? That's not going to work. We're looking at supplying this with different vendors, the different organizations and different companies that supply food to, for example, Wawa and to ShopRite and to the Acme's. We're looking at prearranged contracts with those vendors to bring food in so that when we man these shelters, we're going to be able to take care of the people. Thank God this time it was only a 2-3 day event. But there were shelters opened up in long outside of Ocean County and Monmouth County that were open for a month. And you just don't go put a couple hundred people into a gymnasium. You have to feed them. You have to supply security. You have to supply food. We've managed to work through the government surplus program in the county. We're looking at a plan of getting 20 high-wheel vehicles, and we were going to distribute 2 of these for each one of the municipalities. We're going to keep 4 in reserve for a tactical task strike team that in case there's an emergency in one particular town, we'll be able to mobilize either firefighter, EMS, or any type of urban search or rescue teams will be able to respond right from the county. So far, we have 3 trucks. We managed to get 3 from an Army base down in Virginia, and they're down at the airport being retrofitted right now. We had another problem with we're working with the state police on a communication system. Now I know a couple of troopers are here today and some major staff in the state police, and they know, and they'll be the first ones to admit that this E-team system did not work the way it was supposed to during the storm. That's a communication tool to go back and forth to the Rock up in Trenton, to the state emergency management. It's a internet-based system. You put your request in through an email, it goes up. We were getting a response 3-4 days later, so that didn't work. We're working with the state police to develop a better strategy, a better way to communicate with the other resources. I mentioned before the ESF system that we put into play. We have a county government that has close to 900 employees with, I think, something like 22 different divisions and departments within the government. We're assigning the emergency support functions to different parts of the county government. We've got 900 people, approximately. They're all essential personnel during an emergency. And each one of these, for example, transportation, fare-free transportation, we've got close to 60-some buses in the county. The communications, ESF2, we're working with the MIS department of the county for communications. The Public Works and Engineering, our engineer Dale Foster would be considered the ESF3. Firefighting, the firefighting task force and the mutual aid agreements that we have with all the first responders within the county. The fire marshal, fire coordinators would be part of the ESF4. Mass care sheltering, we're working, the ESF6 is Kevin Thomas through the health department. We've got all of the different departments within the county can be utilized in this ESF system. Public safety, the sheriff's department, the prosecutor's office. We work very closely during this storm. When we put people in shelters, you just don't put them in a gymnasium, you need security. You can't turn people away from a shelter, and you never know who you're going to get. We found that out in the Cumberland County shelter during Hurricane Irene. We had some major problems with a lot of buses coming in from Atlantic City. We're asking each one of the municipalities that if you send people to a county-run shelter, we'd like you to send a police officer and at least 2 EMTs to help staff that shelter. And we're looking at 12-hour shifts. Long-term recovery. That's something that the county never really anticipated or never got involved in before, but there's the long-term recovery group that was formed under the senior services through Pat Devaney and Donna Groom spearheaded that after the storm. The long-term recovery group is after the Red Cross is done, after FEMA is done, after people collect what insurance they can get. They still are out of their homes. The long-term recovery group of Cape May County so far has over $250,000 in donations. They put a team out about 2 weeks ago that surveyed the hardest hit areas. It was called the World Renew. They were a survey team. They volunteered. They came from all over the country, and they went door to door in the hardest hit areas. They had over 100 people that looked like that they will qualify for some of this donation money, not handing them a check. These are going to be bringing in teams to get their house back together, to do drywall, to do finished carpentry, to do their electrical systems. They've broken that list down to 62 families are still out of their primary residence, mostly in Ocean City and mostly in Wildwood. External communications, another very important department. We're using Lenore as the point of information contact for the ESF-15. As fast as the information comes into us, we have to get it out to the people and to the news media. The news media actually were our partners during the last storm. We had 2 radio stations, an AM and an FM station, embedded with us at the EOC for 3 days. We worked with Channel 40 quite a bit back, giving them the information and sending out our emergency notices. Communication is a big, big point. Just to show you how we had organized it during the storm, each one of those emergency support functions were broken down through an operations planning, logistics, and finance into the recovery phase. we had additional call takers in the EOC, that each one of these positions was filled on a 12-hour shift by a county employee and by volunteers, that as the phone calls started to come in, whether it pertained to a medical emergency, transportation, whatever it was directed to the individual ESF person that was responsible for that. And from there, it was transmitted out to the different task force that we had during the storm. One of the new things that we're going to announce, probably it'll be online in another 2 or 3 weeks, is a new emergency website, Cape May County Emergency. A single point of contact that everyone can go on to that, just type that in, Cape May County Emergency. It's kind of like one-stop shopping. We have adopted a new software program. Actually, we copied it from the Borough of Avalon, so it didn't cost the county anything, Mr. Director. I know you like that. We have a new software program that is more or less almost like a cut and paste system that our dispatchers will be able to cut and paste weather emergencies, weather alerts, anything that comes in from the ROC or from the state emergency management, and put it on this website immediately. And it's not just going to be for emergencies. We're looking at this for any type of man-made disasters in the event that there's a forest fire, which we could be prone to in Cape May County. Other special events that there's emergencies. I mean, unfortunately, everybody witnessed the Boston Marathon situation a few weeks ago. We've got some large concerts in Cape May County. We've got some large soft targets, for example, the Cape May Coast Guard base. Military targets, similar to what happened in other places around the country. We've got the Delaware River Bay Authority that has a major ferry terminal on the New Jersey side that could all be potential targets. This website will give out instantaneous information for everything, not just a disaster. We've also got the information that'll be on it, that'll be the actual tides. There's 4 coast and geodetic tide gauges in the county that have telemetry that will transmit back to this site. You can see the actual tide level, and if it's going to go out, if it's continuing to rise, the rate of rise. Atlantic City Electric outage map will be on this website. You can go in and look and see exactly where the outages are. You can type in that if you have a problem and your laptop is still running on battery, you can transmit your outage back to Atlantic City Electric on this website. There'll be an educational component with preparedness for people. The benefits of the website will also be, we're asking that the local municipalities that have emergency websites, we're going to tie in links to this one. So you will get local information. If you're on the county website and you want to go back to Wildwood, you can go back to the local OEM website for the city of Wildwood. And a lot of the times the proof that this is a very important, just in Hurricane Sandy, Avalon's got a population year-round of about 1,200 people. And during the storm, we had 2.1 million hits on that website from people from all over the East Coast because we updated that website about every half hour. We just put it in about 3 months before the storm. 283,000 pages were viewed. One of the biggest problems that we had during Sandy was actually re-entry. The freeholder director and I were on the causeway, or several causeways. The problem with social media, it works against you. People that didn't evacuate were sitting there the day after the storm, the sun's out, the electric's on, everything's fine, and they're texting their friends in Philadelphia, yeah, come on down. We had miles of backups on the Ocean City Causeway, on the Stone Harbor Boulevard, going into Wildwood. And it's not safe until your emergency responders canvass the neighborhood and checking for gas leaks, electric wires down, that type of thing. The towns that put instantaneous messages out on their website to tell the people exactly what's going on, people will get used to that. They're going to go to the municipal website or the county website and they're going to say, this town is not open. You will be stopped at the causeway. So don't bother driving down. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you, and I want to thank everybody who volunteered their services during that last storm. It meant a lot, and then you can see how important volunteerism is. And I'm going to be around the whole day for the conference, and then anybody has any questions, please feel free to track me down. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty. And just a couple comments on Marty and on Sandy. when we hold up in the, what we call the bunker underneath the library with all the staff and everybody else, when we talk about essential personnel, and Marty mentioned the almost 900 county employees that we have, we utilize them because we are a regional form of government, and we can activate those employees rather quickly. One example is that we realized that we're going to have to make sure that for the shelters, we were able to have the necessary foods to support those people in the shelters. We went to Cresthaven Nursing Home and talked to the director of food services there, John Mathis. And I said, John, how many meals can we put out? And he looked at me and said, Director, if you need us, I can put out 2,500 meals a day. Now, that was pretty amazing. I was really kind of shocked. But they're the type of resources that we have here regionally that's so very, very important. And also, when we talk about that staff, the staff that came to emergency management just to answer phones and do all that thing, because we were getting hundreds and hundreds of phone calls. I mean, we had, you know, the people from tourism in there, and we had Beth Bazzelli, who's the clerk of the board there. So it's extremely important. We had the staff from the prosecutor's office there, so they were coordinating with local police departments. It's so very, very important that we all work together here, and we have done that. And Lenora did an outstanding job with radio and me. But I'm going to emphasize what Marty said. This social media, I can tell you, Facebook and Twitter, they caused us major, major problems. I mean that sincerely. I'm not sure how we can control that, but we're working on it. But it was unbelievable, the messages that were going out and saying, okay, everything's good here, we're recovered and everything else. And we had emergency vehicles trying to get on the barrier islands from the utility companies that were backed up, that couldn't get into town, that the police had to escort them into town to get around the traffic backup. That's really serious. That is absolutely serious. And now, ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker will be Joseph Pisciano, who's a Deputy Director of the New Jersey Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness. Director Pisciano is a former federal official with almost 30 years' experience in preparing for and responding to catastrophic events. He heads the branch of Office of Homeland Security Preparedness, responsible for overseeing state policy on readiness for natural and man-made disasters. The division also coordinates statewide protection of critical infrastructure, the distribution of federal and state Homeland Security grants and counterterrorism, and preparedness training and exercising. He also worked closely with the New Jersey Office of Emergency Management with county and local OEMs throughout the state, which are responsible for emergency response and recovery operations. Joe?
First of all, I need to let you know that I worked with Marty going back maybe 25 years ago, so you're really fortunate having him as your county emergency manager. In Avalon, he had some innovations well ahead of time, including offshore erosion control systems, probably one of the most, you all know this, aggressive dune protection programs in the state, recognized by the federal government, and we've brought in a whole bunch of people to tour the area many, many years ago, including some folks from academia. So you've got a solid person, and you can tell by the presentation he's thinking ahead. And in emergency management, that's the most important thing to do, is think ahead. First, I think it's important to recognize that our governor, our state police, our Office of Emergency Management, if you go up the coast and talk to those communities and the people on the street, they did a great job. And I think it's important we recognize those. We recognize the volunteers, all the volunteer organizations and the Red Cross and everybody involved in what happened during Sandy, because I've been through a lot of disasters when I was with FEMA, and a couple of things stood out in this event. One is We took care of ourselves. There wasn't as much of outside assistance, believe it or not. When I say outside assistance, meals being shipped from all over the country, special supplies and goods, equipment. We were pretty well set up, and our emergency management, our first responders are a good and tough group in the state of New Jersey. Well-trained, generally well-equipped. We always need more. And I think willing to go out in the street and get their hands dirty and do their job. So we recognize that in the state, and we're just proud to be part of it. What controls our agency, we're the Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness. We're literally driven by an executive order signed in the last administration, and I'm go through this, but we're responsible to ensure the state is prepared, both for an attack, a terrorist attack, and to do investigations, to do analytical work and projecting what may happen, and also just the whole overall area of preparedness. Are we prepared? We're not doing it. We've got great agencies like OEM, Department of Health, that are doing the day-to-day planning, but we're providing some oversight, assistance where necessary, and ensuring that the government in its entirety is prepared. Basically, we all know we have to prepare. The key is understanding what the requirements are of county, state, and local governments, and ensuring that we're working in unison and getting that job done. We recognize the basic planning requirements of the state. Let me just get right to Superstorm Sandy. There it is, tracking up the coast. Category 1, sustained winds 85 miles an hour, and it's important to note this was really less a wind event and much more a surge event. Extremely broad, and again, that's important to keep in mind. What you see here is a modeled hurricane track that we used for planning in 2006. That was a projection of what would happen in the event of a similar storm to Sandy. It is eerily close to what occurred, including power restoration, the degree and level of power restoration. Pretty on target. In the worst part of the storm, 75% of the state was out of power. And if you look at that dialogue on the bottom, 75 to 100%. Again, projections done in 2008. We knew this was going to happen. We tried to prepare. Perhaps we could have prepared even better. But the key is there's information out there. Storm surge. And essentially, this was the killer in this event. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. But just a quick background. National Weather Service and NOAA were very good in the predictive piece of this. They could tell us relatively far out, 36 hours, 24 hours out, basically what the surge projections would be. We've conducted a whole series of after-action reports with various sectors, the water sector, health sector, transportation sector, those key owners and operators, a chemical sector. A general feedback piece we're continually getting is, yes, the predictive information is useful, but it's not specific enough. It did not allow us to make the critical decisions we needed to make at a piece of critical infrastructure, i.e., perhaps a refinery. If they knew specifically what that elevation was, certain equipment would have been turned off and we wouldn't have the damage that we had. So a major lesson learned is understanding what surge means to your specific facility. If you're an owner and operator of a critical piece of infrastructure in your county, your city, or your town. This is a model, again, from 2006, based on surge, which literally has the area in Moonachie that was severely flooded. So again, we had the tools. We know it could happen. Are we preparing? And I think the lesson in Sandy is understand the difference between a surge event and a wind event, because this is what happens in a surge event. We knew it would happen. Did we prepare appropriately? Do communities really understand the implication of surge? And that's the actual event. Keensburg, same thing in Monmouth County. These areas were heavily hit. Again, surge, and as the mayor pointed out earlier, in these older communities that are not built to the standards of today, there's significant impact. And when you're in Monmouth County, you're not talking about summer homes, you're talking about permanent residence, which really drives the issue. Again, typical damage from Sandy. Seaside Heights, I mean, everybody could say, yes, we knew that surge was going to be a big problem there. But think about the Back Bay areas, and think about the implications of insurance. FEMA has now remapped a lot of areas, and they're now considering some of the Back Bay areas as V-zones, which means and requires people may have to elevate and will have costly insurance. So the implications of what surge is, understanding that in your community, understanding your homeowners, even if you weren't in an impacted area, and probably more importantly, if you were not in an impacted area. Let your citizens know who are on the Bay areas, who are in the backside of your communities along the coast. You know, keep in mind, if we have this storm, this is the implication with your rates. You may want to consider options now. It's worth the effort. Again, that's Sandy, but again, the predictive models for surge, we knew what was going to happen. I'll just give you an example. If you look at Irene, 40 substations were destroyed from electrical substations were destroyed throughout the state. About 40 were destroyed in Sandy. How many do you think were in common? 2. Only 2 substations were flooded in both events, meaning completely different events. This was primarily surge. Irene was primarily wind. If we have the hurricane that is not less than a Category 1 when it impacts, we're going to have both. So again, I want to just drive that point home, the criticality of understanding the 2 different events we had, and a real hurricane is both events. And even as I say that, Hurricane Superstorm Sandy was devastating because of surge. Critical infrastructure impacts. Flooded electrical substations, I talked about that. 14 foot of surge. Again, what does that mean? The equipment in substations is not easily repaired. PSE&G did a great job. They literally had to replace components, dry out systems to get stuff operational. But even doing that, those facilities that were impacted, not used to the surge event, probably were not ready to receive the power. So in a lot of cases, utilities may be taking hits for power restoration purposes, but in fact, the damages that are related to that surge were far beyond their capability. It was more of an issue of that owner and operator. Path Hoboken, I don't recall if anybody may remember, I think it was 1992, the major storm with no name. There was a floodgate built at the Hoboken station to avoid this happening, but that was exceeded with the surge in this event. Refinery without power. When we lose infrastructure, you can see what happens. I'm sure you noted the fuel lines up north and some crazy people from probably the mid part of the state driving south here to get gasoline. Probably myself. The key thing here, though, is was it a fuel shortage issue, or was it an emergency generation issue? It was both. Fuel is basically a just-in-time commodity, and the ability to pump is developed on energy. So we were tackling a significant issue in this, and something we're planning for now, how we can do better. We're talking to the petroleum sector, we're talking to the fueling folks, and the people who are moving fuel, tankers and stuff. Rail outages obviously impact everybody. It's a lifeline of our state. Tunnels were flooded. Again, critical infrastructure. I believe that's being taken down, or had been taken down the other day. All 21 counties were designated. Just real quickly overview. And these numbers are older, so it's probably close to 280,000. Direct housing, 55%. FEMA personnel at the maximum point of this event was 3,700. I was in Hurricane Katrina. We had about 5,000 people there, so this is getting up to the same size. This is older, but there was 7.6 million cubic yards 43 days later. And this number is increased by fivefold. There's probably $4.5 billion on the street. That's the Transportation Security Administration. Let's go back. Okay, what are we doing? We have a series of planning events throughout the state. We have a major planning effort up north with the Regional Catastrophic Planning Group, producing products that will be shared statewide, including templates for plans, exercises, organizational structures that could be utilized for different type of events, which we'll share with any county who's interested. That'll be produced by the state and distributed to the Regional Catastrophic Planning team and group, which received $22 million to do planning between New York City and northern New Jersey over the last 4 or 5 years. So there's a lot of products we'd like to share with you. We have a food distribution project working with the major food providers in the state. They actually sat in the EOC, representatives from the New Jersey Food Council and 3 or 4 major providers, ensuring the coordination of opening and closing stores was linked to what the Red Cross was doing and the New Jersey food banks. Really important. A number of lessons learned there regarding emergency generation. This is the Regional Catastrophic Planning team I talked about. 30 counties, 22 million people, one out of every 14 Americans. We talked about food distribution. This year we developed a rapid assessment response team with OEM. We had people up in a helicopter with iPads and the ability to take pictures real time and send it back to the EOC for people to do analysis on the level of damage. We're trying to hone that in even further, and next year have more capability to bring it to the county, so we're able to see what we're seeing at the same time. Long-term recovery planning. Marty mentioned that, absolutely critical. Continue our work with the private sector through, we have an infrastructure advisory committee. It's a state organization working with all the sectors, water, power, electric, the chemical, health sectors. We meet regularly. It's formed by legislation. That group conducted a whole series of after-action reports which we're using to drive future decisions on how we work with critical infrastructure. The state has a state-supported shelter initiative. In coordination with the Department of Human Services, our office, the Office of Homeland Security, has established a system to open up a statewide shelter in the event county capacity is overcome. That happened in Atlantic County and Atlantic City in both Irene and also for Sandy. We were able to open 4 facilities that allowed us to bring people in. Very difficult for states to do that, and we're one of the few states who are trying to do this. We are hopeful this year, and I'm very pleased that the county is being very aggressive in identifying even more shelters, because ultimately sheltering is the responsibility of local government and then county government, and in the end, state government. In a significant catastrophic event, the issue of shelters may be more an issue of out-of-state evacuation. And that is, again, something we need to think about. Again, remember this event was a surge event. Remember Irene was primarily a wind event. We could have the hurricane that includes both those scenarios. So please keep that in mind in your planning. We have a private sector desk for coordination purposes in the EOC, staffed by 10 people. Working with OEM, we take in calls from all our private sector partners throughout the state to ensure we can address their immediate concerns. It's sort of like a concierge desk. We've had people from the fuel industries call us and say, how do we move fuel into the state of New Jersey? We had the utilities calling us regarding easy pass issues. Every hour delay out of state for a utility truck equates to a 24-hour delay in restoration services in the state of New Jersey. So the fleet management piece of this is really critical. We're working with the fleet management groups from 16 separate utilities to develop a process, including an app that will allow them to get the latest information on roadway openings, tolls, cost of tolls, processing, what waivers are needed for the purposes of transportation to help move in assistance to New Jersey. We did it in an ad hoc fashion this event. We need to be a little more organized. The Radiant RFID system was a major success. The state has invested $600,000 in a Radiant system for sheltering. It's a wristband that's read, not scanned. It's a Radiant type of device. Portals are put out outside the facility. When you go in, it's sort of where's grandma? In Katrina, we lost a lot of people through all over the country because we couldn't track them. Once you register within the facility, you'll have a radiant band on. That band will allow us and the folks running shelters to know where you are. And it's not an intrusion on privacy. You can call yourself anything you want. We can scan a license if you'd like to do that, but we're not looking to get a lot of information on people. We just want to know where you are. We understand the limitations of with the Red Cross concern about privacy, so we're not going inside any shelter to do this. We're working with the National Guard. It was very successful in Monmouth County, and we even used it to some extent in Atlantic County on some of the transfer points. Excellent system. And it's available for any county to use for exercises or purposes, or if there's an event in this area, we can roll it out. Some of the benefits, who was in a shelter, reunification purposes, and shelter management, obviously. We made an investment through the Regional Catastrophic Planning Group of a few $1 million and stockpiled a facility in New Jersey. And we absolutely used every bit of the materials we stockpiled, which is one of the reasons we did not require FEMA support in this event. We had enough to provide food for 37,000 people for 12 days. Meals ready to eat, blankets, clothing, major asset. We put it together to support the state-supported shelters, but it turned out to be very useful statewide. State police and OEM coordinated with us, and again, just an excellent planning opportunity here, and we have restocked this now for the next hurricane season. Social media pilot. I mean, it's interesting because it's a double-edged sword. We asked for a pilot to be developed for social media mining because on the flip side of social media, in a lot of counties, I was in Delaware and a couple of other states, use this really successfully. They get a real true measure of impact. They can begin to look at, from an analytical perspective, looking at geographical areas, who's lost a roof, how many people are evacuating, how many are staying in place, who's complaining about certain things, is there looting going on? So there are plus things if you're looking at this. We set up a pilot with a company called Surveillance for 90 days. It happened to run through the Sandy event, which was fortuitous because we identified a couple of rescue opportunities. We looked at a number of trends in regards to looting and a number of other events. On the flip side, perhaps to help you on your issue, you could be an aggressive user of the technology and push back by blasting through social media your concerns, the level of transportation constraints in the area, and almost reverse control of the situation. So it's something to consider. I'm too old to use any of these myself, but I hear they work. Yeah, I know. Plans ahead. We're expanding our efforts with the food and other retail providers. We are, as a matter of fact, meeting with the big box stores again next week. And we're asking that they maintain a presence right in the state EOC, would reach back to our counties. We want to integrate them even further. They work very well in your given counties. I'm sure you have good relationships with individual companies. Keep it up. But when it becomes a regional event, there's a need to coordinate because they need assets delivered. They need to be part of the decisions of debris clearance, what goes first, what goes second. So we're going to try to build that a little further this year. Long-term economic recovery plans, very important. Can't stress this. The food sector, for example, we've met with them on a number of occasions. They're low margin, on-demand type companies. So if you're not clear in what your repopulation rate's going to be, that could impact their decision to build a store or to rebuild a store or to put back the store the same size it was. So we need to learn how to share the economic impacts of what's going to happen in the way of repopulation, what neighborhoods are going to do. So in the case of Sandy, the longer it takes to repopulate, that's a big burden on companies who are supporting those communities. And again, Cape May fortunately wasn't impacted as significantly, but that's something I'd recommend as a consideration. Talk to your major owners and operators and find out what are the most important things in a recovery for you. What do you need to know to get back to business? Restoration of critical infrastructure, absolutely critical. I talked about that before. Enhancement of public awareness and education. Great example. As a matter of fact, Cape May has been very aggressive. Each year I always catch all the stuff that's out there. So you do a really good job here. So I'm not going to tell you can do more, but you always could do more. And I think maybe social media may be an effort you want to look at, but an excellent job down here. Further improving our relationship with the federal government. I don't know if we want to do that, but I work with them, I can tell you. No, actually that is important. But I think the key thing to remember is you have an Office of Emergency Management who is really responsible for tightening up those relationships with the federal government. But it is important to understand the operational framework, as Marty's doing, the emergency support functions. There's also a flip side of that. There's a whole series of functions now that are recovery functions, because the recovery starts day one. Because as soon as that event's over, you need to begin thinking recovery. And oftentimes, that smart person who does that is usually in a shelter taking care of folks. So learning how to separate the functional areas is pretty important. Important to think regionally. Who are your partners? It's good that the county is looking to shelter more in place. But as events get bigger, that regional approach is really important. Those MOUs with additional counties, with the state, understanding the state shelter system is really critical. And I would also, always think about the messaging you're going to need, and when you're going to have a major evacuation that could even be out of state. That's often overlooked in coastal communities. What is that philosophy? What are you willing to tell your citizens if that ever happened? Measuring and managing risk. When you look at the benefits and costs after a major catastrophic event, and I mentioned this a couple of times, complex flood and surge protection measures. You've got excellent surge maps. The Weather Service will give you a good idea of what's going to happen, but that's only step one. Those maps are often misread. Homeowners often look at a surge map and say, well, if it's that big, it must be really deep where it starts. On my end, it's just a couple of inches. It doesn't work that way. People need to understand that, particularly those critical pieces of infrastructure in your county. Hardening present utility systems, that's something to consider in the recovery phase and plan ahead for. Cost-sharing opportunities with other groups or other sectors. What are your large companies willing to cost-share with you to develop warning systems, surge systems, protective measures around critical facilities? A lot of folks after Sandy up north are thinking, we're going to invest in a protective measure sandbagging effort at our cost because it allows us to operate quicker, get back into business and make money, and then really helpful, okay, we'll give you an easement. That's the sort of thing you need to think about now. Operational and system improvements. You alluded to E-Team, which is absolutely important. The ability to track resources will either make or break you in an event. The inability to understand what's available, how it'll get to you, and when it will get to you is probably the most important thing in a recovery. The worst thing you want to do is call somebody up in the EOC and ask for something and not get the answer you want to hear in a day, 2 days, 3 days, or 4 days. So if you're going to test anything, if you're going to build anything, understand how to track resources. Who's in charge of doing that in your county? And make certain they understand the criticality of that piece of the effort. When you're finished changing, you're finished. So basically, we've learned a lot, and we need to continue to change. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. And we will have a little question period after our speakers are finished here. We'll have a question and answer period. Our next speaker is Kevin Hayden, who is Director of Emergency Planning for the New Jersey Department of Health. Kevin coordinated the initial development of the Health Emergency Preparedness and Response Division within the Department of Health and Senior Services during 202 and 203. Assigned as the DHSS liaison to the Domestic Security Task Force, Kevin coordinated federal grant programs with the Office of the Attorney General, Office of Domestic Preparedness, Urban Area Security Initiative, and Centers for Disease Control. Additionally, he is the liaison to the State Communications Interoperability Council, Domestic Security Executive Planning Group, and State Office of Emergency Management. Kevin has worked with local OEMs to develop plans for long-term care nursing facilities and more. And I want to say this because Kevin and his staff from Health and Senior Services have been working with us now for, I know, more than 3-4 years. And it was their initiative after Katrina and what happened to the long-term care facilities in Katrina that we here, particularly in Cape May County, developed an evacuation program for long-term care facilities. And Sean, who is here with us today, was a critical partner as far as emergency services, as far as the ambulance corps and everyone. If you don't realize it, during Hurricane Irene, we evacuated our long-term care facilities. More than 1,400 frail elderly were moved out of Cape May County to protect them from that storm. It was the largest long-term care evacuation in the history of the nation. And it was because of our work with the State Department of Health and EMS and the Sheriff's Department and Fare Free Transportation and all of us coordinating early on. And I don't know how it happened, but I think it was a month or 6 weeks before that in Wildwood, we had a conference there regarding long-term care evacuation, and then a month later, suddenly we're in the business, actually in the business of doing it. So Kevin has been just an intricate part of that aspect of what we've done here in Cape May County. Kevin?
Thank you, Director. As you noticed before the break, I saw about 30 people run out. I hope it wasn't because of me. I hope it's because they had to use the restrooms. So I won't be insulted if anybody wants to leave during this. Let me see if I can get my, Joe, going to end this show? I did. Oh, works too. Director Thornton, thank you for those kind comments. He's correct. During Irene, we evacuated not only Cape May but Atlantic County, and we did evacuate between the both counties almost 2,528 people with little or no impact on emergency services. That's why I'm a strong proponent of being self-sufficient and working within a regional concept, as Joe was talking about in his, that we maybe have to look at regional aspects. Marty, thank you for inviting me, as always. I know a lot of people in this audience. I see Lieutenant Milligan, Jeff, I think he just left from Cape Regional, and Tom Foley. Where are you? Still here, Tom? Oh, you're going to the bathroom. I'll see you later. Oh, this is going to be good. I can see that already. What I'm going to talk about today is preparedness, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do from a health department perspective with regard to, how do I move this up and down? There you go. Medical surge. Now, how many EMS people do we have here? EMS? 1, 2. Hospital workers? Well, this is really talks about you. How many people have ever worked in a shelter? A little bit more? I know a lot of people have worked in shelters here. So we're going to touch on those programs here. Department of Health is currently working on some major state projects, which includes the alternate care sites. That's really for hospitals, where we develop plans and templates for them. The Commissioner of Health is going to give them out to each healthcare system within the state of New Jersey, along with expanded treatment areas. That's a healthcare component. We are also working on the state reception centers with OHSP and state medical needs sheltering. We still need a long way to go. And in the region, and I constitute the region as the 7 southern counties of the state of New Jersey, that's what I'm responsible for. I was up in Trenton for several years and finally said, send me back out to the region. It's better to be working on the boots on the ground. So we did a good project, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that and how that affects everyone here. Let me talk historically. Historically, sheltering was a municipal and a county responsibility, and it still remains that way. I'm a strong believer in expanding that to maybe a regional as opposed to going to state-run shelters, but we can talk about that at some other time. We've had 4 major events in the South region over the past 4 years. A lot of people forget the derecho and all the snowstorms, and Irene, and of course we had Sandy. We witnessed the 2 largest single evacuations of coastal communities in New Jersey twice in 2 years. And the second time, during Sandy, with little or no impact on emergency services. Back in Irene, we would get phone calls. All I heard this time was, we're leaving, we're out, we're back. And that's what they did. So they did a very good job. And that came from planning, training, and exercising. Cape May itself, we had those exercises that we ran a couple of years ago. In fact, we're having another one come up on June the 4th. We're running another series of exercises for the long-term care community. That's our most vulnerable population, and that's what we need to talk about. And then we found that our sheltering, more important, our medical need sheltering needs to be improved. We did okay. I give you maybe a passing grade, but we need to improve over and over again. And I'm going to give you some historical facts. This is data based on what the Red Cross found out in Long Island. And this is called their CMIS program. And what they were doing is measuring unmet needs in sheltering. If you look here, you see the largest unmet need is the maintaining of health. Although it says medical on there, it's actually the maintaining of health in the shelter. Now, for those of you who have worked in shelters, you'll know what I'm talking about. We get the general populations, our access and functional needs, and then we get the medical needs component, and that can throw us out of whack. And what we're not doing to our best ability is good public information. So you'll see that it talks about communication on your on my far left, as your guys are looking at it. Medical, 70% of the unmet needs within this shelter of over 1,000 people was maintenance of health, and that is to support or the maintenance of chronic health conditions. People enter the shelters with health conditions that pre-exist. And Kevin, we talked about this before this morning, and we need to do a few things from a regional perspective. What we tried to do before this conference is, McFadden, who from my office is in here, and we feel that good public information prior to the event is important for our communities. And we'll give this to everybody, but we're vetting this right now through the State Department of Health. There's a few things we need to change in there. And Dan, you want to add to that at all?
No, just the importance of this document is to, we're going to fix what it says so that it's giving the right message to the right population, but we need this message to get out. The way we reduce that 72% of unmet medical needs is by the population that is coming to the shelter being prepared themselves. They bring the right medications with them. They bring their right medical equipment with them. They bring enough clothing and supplies for at least 3 days. Because remember, when we open a medical needs shelter, we open it at least 24 hours in advance of the storm hitting. So we have that day, we have the day of the storm, and at least 24 hours or more before we can send that population back to their home. So what we're asking for you to do is, once we finish this information, and if you have ideas, send them to us for this, but we need to figure out a way of getting this information out. County websites, one way we can do it. Those social medias that those of us with the color hair I have and the hairline don't understand how to use, but everybody who's under 30 uses it 24 hours a day. We need to get these messages out on social media so that people know. Prepare themselves that if they're going to evacuate, to bring the right things with them. And lastly, on this document, you'll see Register Ready. That is a database for those people who have issues with self-evacuating to a shelter, can register on Register Ready, and it's broken down by county throughout the state. And further down, we can break it down by municipality or zip code, so that you can send a message out to these people. Yes, you are being evacuated. These are the things to bring with you. One of the things we had a problem with Irene was those people who were charged with evacuating the population off the barrier islands were too busy saying, come on, come on, come on, get on the bus. And they weren't saying, do you have your stuff with you? Because they had never done this before. Now we've done it twice, let's get it right on the third time. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dan. Like I said, this is in draft form. We're putting this throughout the Department of Health for input. We'll be talking to the health officers in the counties to talk about that, and we'll make this part of that emergency preparedness public information that should go out ahead of an event. Now, once you put this out there, you know, everybody's going to have their own idea, and we were trying to populate. We wanted to keep it to one piece of paper, so it'll be easy. And I asked a real renowned person who understands the elderly, my wife, who says there's two sides of the paper. You can put it on both sides. And I really, really, really appreciate that, hon. Made me feel real smart. But anyway, I digress. Okay, we're going to talk about regions. And like I said, I'm a proponent of regional aspects. We developed a modular medical expansion system 3 years ago with health grants that we received. Part of it had to do with hospitals, and part of it had to do with sheltering. The reason why hospitals and sheltering are on the same breath is because if there's an event, we don't want to oversurge the hospitals. We want to be able to provide care to the hospitals, but in some cases we cannot simply do it. So what we did is we wanted to develop the capability and the capacity, and we provided also some standard operating guidelines and appendices, and I'll talk about that project. That was a project that we worked hand in glove with OHSP, who provided some money for us. And again, deploying plans, personnel, equipment, and facilities to respond to any type of emergency event. We have an alternate care center. For those of you in healthcare, understand that alternate care centers are not on hospital property. Expanded treatment areas are on hospital property. I see somebody back there nodding their head saying, you work in a hospital?
No, got a heart problem.
Oh. And medical needs sheltering can be either community, county, or state, so long as the state shelter system. We should put in here regional aspects. And I just went through this before. Medical surge, and this is what medical needs sheltering. This is what I want to concentrate on. This is what it is, and this is what it's not. It provides short-term supportive medical care to persons displaced from their homes or specialized facility and cannot stay at a general shelter population due to the medical needs. They can't be commingled within those populations. You can have a standalone medical needs shelter, or you can co-locate them. But that's important. That's what it is. It's short-term, and it's subacute care. It's not medical care that we were witnessing in some. And the key to that is good triage, and I'll get to that a little bit later. And again, we gave this to our partners in the 7 southern counties. OHSP asked us to issue to Ocean and Monmouth. We provided funding to the hospitals, and we provided funding to the county OEMs. Not provided funding, we provided equipment to them for caches of bedding, sheets, cots, pillows, some of those things. It was a beginning. It's not perfect yet. I know I was speaking to Kevin before this too. There's a lot of things we need to do, maybe upgrade in the coming months with our grant processes. Each healthcare system received a portable trailer with a cache of medical equipment, bedding, disposable goods for 25-bed capacity. Each of the county OEMs or health departments received a similar trailer for M&S operation, and regional coalition partners developed an MOU and with each other for the use of this equipment. In case I borrow it, if I borrow it, when I send it back, I've got to replenish it. That's basically what the MOU says. Here are all the healthcare facilities that we gave these caches to. You'll see that some of our larger healthcare systems, such as Atlantic Care, Lourdes, and Virtua, receive more than one of those caches. We gave this to 18 healthcare facilities in the 7 southern counties and Ocean and Monmouth. That's over 25% of the population of the hospital census in New Jersey, which I think is a good start, a very good start. We also provided caches of equipment to all the counties that I talked about before, but we included back-rack rehab where we have problems in emergencies where we have to have bariatric patients, bariatric cots, bariatric wheelchairs. We also provided them 3 caches to the long-term care facilities, one in Pittman Manor, which is in Camden County, Gloucester County, thank you, Masonic Homes and the Lord's Healthcare System in Voorhees. And we gave 3 caches to the American Red Cross of the type of equipment that we gave out to everybody else. This was a Delta project, which many of you are familiar with in the room. I know the county is, I know Joe is. We hired a contractor to develop standard operating guidelines and appendices for medical needs sheltering. They're not prescriptive. If you want to use them, you can. If you don't want to use them, that's up to you. But it's a good start to get the people moving along the lines. We developed a gap analysis of sheltering pre-Sandy, post-Irene, pre-Sandy, and we developed these standard guidelines and operational readiness. We sent them to all the county OEMs. We sent them to all the county health departments through 21 counties. This was a South Region project, but we share it with the rest of the state. That's already been done. The key to the project was this: clear medical triaging. What is medical triaging? Honey, you don't need to raise your hand, but how many nurses do we have in here? ER nurse? No. Triaging, you need that set of skills that comes from medical, from a hospital condition ER type of nurse who knows how to get this done, or a practitioner who knows how to get it done. That's the key to sheltering, medical needs sheltering, medical needs triage. We provided a medical algorithm, if this, then that, if this, then that. We provided triage throughput, how we get those people in and move them out, medical triage staffing patterns, job action sheets, just-in-time training. We gave it out to the people and our partners. And then we were to conduct an after-action report as part of the contract, but this little thing called Sandy got in our way, and we had an AAR based on what happened in Sandy. And what happened in Sandy was exactly what they said in Long Island. 70% of the problems we have with unmet needs had to do with medical conditions, caring for people in that type of service. Again, I just want to summarize this. What we've done as a region, I think we're doing good, but we need to get better, especially at that medical needs triage and how we handle that and who can do what to which. There still needs a lot of work to be done, and that's the way I'm going to leave it there, and we'll ask for comments later on. And again, I thank you. Director, I thank you for inviting me to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. And we know firsthand how important it is to evaluate the medical needs, particularly when we have such a large population of elderly. And we found that during Hurricane Sandy in the shelters, that because we had some elderly there that were medically compromised, and we had to move them rather quickly. We moved 14 of those elderly to the Cresthaven nursing home because in the shelter they couldn't meet their needs. So that's an example of how we have to make sure that we plan more for that very issue. Because quite honestly, if we didn't have Cresthaven with some vacant beds at that time, it would have turned into a major crisis. Okay, and now Robert Van Fossen was scheduled to speak today on behalf of the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. However, due to personal reasons, he was unable to join us. So, therefore, we have James Manuel, Regional Chief for the Bureau of Emergency Response for DEP, will be speaking today in Robert's place. James has over 29 years' experience with the Department of Environmental Protection. Are you safe in this county? and is currently the supervisor of the Bureau of Emergency Response. Since Superstorm Sandy, James has been involved in many storm-related issues, including cleanup for the Department of Environmental Protection. Jim, please, if you would.
I spent a lot of quality time here during the Anitra oil spill.
I was with you then.
Yeah, we had quite a time at Stone Harbor. Let's see if I can find this. There we go. Yeah, Bob couldn't make it today. His biography is in there. It all reads the same. We all worked on the same incidents, storms, oil spills, anthraxes, other than the Rider College part. I went to Wake Forest. But Bob has his regrets. He's actually having his hip replaced, so he should be back in action in a little while. I'll give him a little break from all the work that we've been doing after the storm. Now, he did tell me that he was planning on talking about debris management, which is a big role that we're playing as far as this storm goes right now. And I do notice you have in your brochure that the role of DEP during and after a storm. So before I get started with that, I'll just quickly run through what we did during and prior to the storm. We got involved in the state EOC early on when the storm was predicted to have an impact up here. All the pre-planning operations as far as relaxing certain regulations with solid waste, was planning to do all that. We had our water resources people, the people that regulate sewer plants, prepped up to join us in the EOC, which was a good thing because one of the things that was knocked out was some of the biggest sewer plants in the state up there in Middlesex and Passaic Valley, resulting in a lot of sewer discharge for really weeks, uncontrolled. The things that DEP regulates, a lot of people don't even realize, even some of the people in the EOC were a little surprised at the things we touch. It goes for everything from the sewer and water treatment plants, the Forest Fire Service, who provides a lot of the high-wheeled vehicles, chainsaw crews for recovery efforts. We have the state parks, which are some of the personnel there are utilized in various aspects of the storm. The state parks themselves we utilize for staging and for other uses. There's a lot of other state facilities that DEP controls that come into play. We regulate the nuke plants, which obviously have to be prepped up for an event like this. So there's a lot of varied things. And then there's us in emergency management, where we play along with all the other emergency managers in the state. And in this storm, we really got involved in not only our normal role of getting high-wheeled vehicles to places, but interacting with the Fuel Merchants Association, because the sewer plants that were damaged were running out of fuel for their emergency generators. So those guys actually set up a blog site to sort of freelance the purchase and transport of fuel to get it to some of these places when they were about to run out. So, you know, everybody sort of stepped in and went outside the lines during the storm event. And then after the storm event, immediately afterwards, obviously all the infrastructure that DEP gets involved with coastal resources and lakes and streams, we come into play with that. The one thing that we also did do, our unit as well as the US EPA got involved very quickly in trying to get a handle on hazardous materials that were spilled. We had a lot of oil spills up in the northern area. We had one spill that was 300 and some thousand gallons, which sort of nobody heard about. It was actually a fairly major spill. Any day of the week, if it happened, it'd be on the headlines, but the storm sort of trumped it. But there was a very large, more than one very large spill up in the Arthur Kill area that we had to deal with. We worked with EPA to round up abandoned containers, fuel tanks that floated away, clean up oil spills. That went on for a number of weeks immediately after the storm. And then we sort of phased into the recovery effort, working up at the FEMA office in Lincroft, working on debris management, which is one of our duties in the ESF world, which is what this is going to mainly deal with. Obviously, when the northern part of the state, you guys were lucky down here. I've always had the sense that, you know, Cape May realizes how close to sea level they are. I live up in northern Ocean County, actually just due west of Mantoloking, which took one of the biggest hits in the storm, and on the mainland on high ground. But I can tell you from living there all my life that those people up there in Monmouth and Ocean County got slapped upside the head with this. They really, you talked about complacency earlier. Up there, especially inland. I mean, the barrier islands know what they are, but the inland folks, a lot of friends of mine really didn't pay attention to this with the storm surge, and a lot of them got big surprises, and a lot of them still aren't living in their houses. So that being said, EOC, the governor, and all of his executive staff took up residence there, so we had a lot of support within the state EOC to get things done when they needed to from a lot of the higher level folks. Again, you've probably seen this before. This is Mantoloking. It's the new inlet that was formed. There was actually roughly 7 breaches that took place in that area. You can also see in this picture on the western side of the bridge an oil spill trailing off up there. That's coming from a marina. That's one of the things that we were dealing with during the storm. Essentially, it was oil spill everywhere you went. Every body of water that I looked at after the storm had an oil sheen on it, and to the point where on a normal day, any one of them would have been a problem for us, but after that storm, we were only able to concentrate on the large-scale spills. The structures in that area of highest destruction, roughly from Seaside up through northern Ocean County and parts of Monmouth County, was absolutely unbelievable. The number of structures that disappeared right there in that section of Mantoloking alone that just simply got wiped out, which will lead in, as you'll see, to this debris management aspect. I think really it caught us all by surprise how much debris was generated and how important the whole debris removal aspect of this thing became. Initially land-based, which was mostly handled by local towns and counties. Ocean County contracted, I know, with Ashbridge. Some towns used their own public works folks or contracted privately. There was a mixed bag of how people handled the land-based debris. I mean, we had up there, we had entire houses that just, instead of coming apart, they stayed in one piece and just went where they went. That was one of the ones in Mantoloking. That's an aerial shot of the same house that you can see sitting down there at the base of the bridge. You can also see the amount of sand that was displaced along with these houses, where it just washed everything and swept clean garbage cans, garden sheds, fences, whatever happened to be laying around is in the water. As you can see around this one house that got pushed off its lot into the edge of the bay, there's fence posts, there's siding, everything under the sun is out there in the form of debris in the waterway. This is it's an aerial shot right where that inlet came through to the right side of the picture. That was right after they filled that inlet in and blocked it off. You can see that one house that I showed sitting there in the shoals. And that's the one you saw earlier in one of the other presentations. That was formerly located all the way over where you see those other houses at, right off the corner of the picture. That's a regular. It actually had seals living on it for a while. It just recently has been taken down, which is another aspect of this whole thing that I don't know that we fully anticipated. All of these, and a lot of people thought there were hundreds or dozens of houses. I actually counted about 8 of them that were actually in the water itself, so there wasn't all that many. But the legal aspect of these things became quite a trick. Everybody thought, well, okay, at some point we'll get a contractor out there or the insurance company, they'll tear them down. Well, the Attorney General's office had to weigh in. There was EPA weighed in and said, well, you have to treat the entire house as asbestos debris, which really complicates things on the dismantling and the disposal end as far as what you have to do and how the cost gets driven up. We've negotiated some of those things over time. There's been a lot of bumps along the road, and what FEMA wants and what other agencies wants, because you don't get paid by FEMA unless you comply with all state and federal regulations, which includes our own regulations, EPA's regulations, whoever it might be. So that's an important aspect of it. Again, that's that same house. That's actually the lot that it came from. And you kind of see the house sitting out there. Man, here's one from down this way. That was in Avalon. As far as I know, we never figured out where that building actually came from. Maybe somebody here knows, but I never could.
I didn't say nothing, it was mine.
So yeah, there it is. And you know, it was all over the state. Union Beach, this is up north on the Bay Shore. This particular house wound up on the Meadows. A very long argument ensued, and this one is gone now too, after about a week or so ago. FEMA said it wasn't eligible because it wasn't on land that was a hazard to anybody. It was unimproved land, so it wasn't eligible for FEMA, so essentially at that point we had no way to get rid of it. Again, we negotiated that, and it's now gone. Here you can see where that house came from, that over along that roadway by the Bay Shore. The Raritan Bay is right over there. That's where it ended up, down there on the Meadows. So it traveled quite a distance. A lot of houses in that area are smashed up. That's the only one that I knew of that moved intact over there. Again, down this way along Delaware Bay, around Cedarville, a lot of destruction around there. A lot of those houses sort of hang out over the water anyway, but there was a lot of damage down there. Just some before and after things that I had done. These were actually from another PowerPoint I did, but you can see, looking at this, the upper picture is Long Branch before the storm. You can see how far back the beach has been pushed and the amount of sand that they've lost and erosion. Again, there's Mantoloking. You can get an appreciation. That upper picture shows all of those houses that were out there at one time, and you can see on the bottom one really what's left. And if you look in the very upper fringe of that picture, a lot of that stuff that disappeared out there wound up either sunk in the bay or on the opposite side of the bay. There's 2 or 3 very large portions of houses still out on the western side of the bay over there. It's loaded with debris out on the western side. Again, the infamous Seaside Pier before and after. The roller coaster being what it is, that went away the other day finally. Our biggest problem isn't that roller coaster. Our problem has been what you see there where the pier got destructed and everything fell off of it and came apart, all down below there in Seaside Park and down even into Island Beach State Park. There's a humongous amount of debris that keeps washing up on the ocean front that came from not only that, but the boardwalk itself and any other loose objects that got sucked back out after the storm water receded, and it continues to turn up, and I think it's going to be a problem, you know, for some time to come on the ocean front in some areas that had the worst destruction from, again, Mantoloking down through Seaside. I think we're going to see a lot of problems with that. This time of year, we're getting sand accreting onto the beaches, so a lot of that stuff that's in the surf is going to get buried, and then in the fall, when that sand goes away, I think we're going to get more stuff coming up. We'll probably have more stuff exposed. It's just going to have to work its way out to an extent. Again, Atlantic City, the boardwalk, all those boards that came apart went somewhere. They either went out in the ocean, they went across and into the Bayside, they got scattered around through the city. There's a lot of lumber out there. Passaic Valley Sewage Plant, they really had a major mess up there. They're still not, I don't believe, at 100%, neither is Middlesex. This is Tuckerton. As you can see, the amount of flooding that took place. The houses, for the most part, around there are on pilings, so they stayed put, but all of their stuff, the robo-cans are a big one, these roll-around garbage cans that all the towns use now. They disappeared by the thousands. All those barrier island communities from Brick and Seaside, Mantoloking, all had those type of cans, and they're all gone. And a lot of them we didn't find on the Bayside. We figured out that they're all in the bay itself. We actually had one that we found threw in the water. They sink like a safe. So they're going to be a problem because they're not turning up a lot in the normal debris that we're picking up. So they're likely to be there for a long time, being made out of plastic. This is a figure of the demolition debris from the land side. It was, over 1.5 million cubic yards of debris that was picked up in those operations. 90% disposed of in state, and 10% was hauled out of state by the various contractors. Northern Ocean County, up where I live, this is the typical mix of debris. It's the mix of lumber, the plastic lawn chairs. You can see a paint can in there and some sort of 5-gallon pail, somebody's fishing rod, shingles off the side of the house. Was and in some places still is everywhere you go up there. And this is on the inland side in Bricktown, where people really didn't think that they would be affected like this. These were some of the debris management areas. Everybody that I've talked to, I wasn't real involved in the land-based recovery of material, but everybody I talked to and the experience I had seemed to think that that whole operation went very well, where these temporary debris management areas were set up. DEP set up a system to promulgate permitting these areas, because all of these temporary disposal sites, these accumulation areas, had to be permitted by DEP, as any normal solid waste facility would be. And that's, again, it goes back to this whole FEMA cost recovery. It all has to be permitted, it all has to be documented. And there are people at these locations, monitors from our own department, as well as the contractors, and from FEMA, that sit there and monitor all of this debris and verify the cubic yards of material. That's the one from up in Long Branch, Long Beach Island. Amongst the debris were a lot of vehicles. Vehicles very early on became a problem because there were so many of them on the barrier islands. This was up in Hoboken, but a lot in New York on Staten Island were all brought back over here. And I was a few weeks into it when all of a sudden it became an issue, because the companies that recover these things for the assurance outfits, they'll find a place. Some of them were at airports, some of them were people's farms that they figured they could make some money and allow these guys to stockpile vehicles. Well, the vehicles got stockpiled by the thousands. And what we found out up in one of the northern areas was that when you just bring flood vehicles into a place like that and stockpile them, and you don't disconnect the batteries and do certain other things, you wind up with leaking fuel. In one case, there was a fire from a shorted out vehicle from the electronics that ended up burning up about 2 or 3 dozen cars. So we kind of had to step in as a department and get some sanity. There was another issue in the Pine Barrens where an outfit cited one of these car lots in the Pine Barrens, so obviously the Pine Barrens folks had a major issue with that. That was one of the things that it was expected but unexpected, the number of problems it caused. Sort of been worked out. Another aspect is the boats. At one point in time, State Marine Police, we utilized them to document, because they have the ability to look up registrations on boats. They're treated as a motor vehicle in the state of New Jersey, so there's a lot of legalities that go along with recovering and what you eventually do with boats. But they had about 1,400 boats at one point on the list of displaced boats. They were everywhere. This happens to be a marina just on the south end of Mantoloking, just north of where all those houses burn up. But you can see the boats, the docks, the concrete slabs that were once part of the marina, all sitting there. That's just what landed in the marina. The other stuff was all out amongst those houses across the lagoon. We had a lot of houses that just simply sunk that are in need of demolishing, and that's been another trick to try to work out via insurance companies, the residents themselves, the townships, the FEMA folks, just trying to get all of these land-based things that aren't in the water demolished so the area can be safe. We've had a lot of looting up around that area, with people stealing pipe and the usual metal items from these places. So there's been a lot of high security that's, it's cost people a lot of money to put security in these places. And for the most part, that particular house right there, I know is pretty much still there in that same condition. So things haven't changed that much in the last 6 months. All of the sedges, the islands, the wetlands along the west side of Barnegat Bay, and even up in the Raritan Bay area are full of all that material that got knocked off of those barrier islands, and also in the lagoon communities. The biggest challenge is that you can't get to this stuff. Some of this stuff is so far in the middle of nowhere and in such shallow water you can't get to it by boat. There's no roads. You can see a swamp cat out there from the Mosquito Commission we used initially to try to find hazardous materials and things like that. A lot of this material is still there. One of the biggest problems that we have with where these things landed is that if it's private property, there's an issue with FEMA. If it's federal property, like all the Forsyth wildlife management areas, which I'm guessing almost 50% of the west side of the undeveloped Barnegat Bay is, you can't spend FEMA money on it. So all the cleanup efforts that we're doing to get material off of these areas and out of the water, if it's on federal land, we can't touch it. The Department of Interior now has money. They have to go and contract separately, even though we have contractors already out there to go get that stuff. So it's kind of a hiccup in things, because you'll have an area where we've cleaned, and then right in the middle of it, you'll have one of these federal areas where the stuff is still laying. And that includes, you can see, I don't know, there looks like about 4 or 5 boats in that one. This is just a cove in Bricktown on the west side of the bay, where the material, looking straight across the bay, I think you're probably looking at Mantoloking or Ortley Beach right across there. So all this material, that's where it came from, was off the barrier island, and we've got to find ingenious ways to recover this material where you can't get boats and you can't get vehicles out to it. And a lot of the stuff is too heavy for people to carry, so you have to cut the material up. It's quite a challenge recovering this stuff. And the warmer it gets, the worse it smells. Again, that's just more stranded material. You can see that boat is a long ways from anything. This was a tank down near Tuckerton, about 1,000-gallon gasoline tank. We got that emptied the other day. Unfortunately, it was on federal land, so we couldn't touch it. So we had to kind of do some maneuvering between us, the federal Fish and Wildlife folks, and the Coast Guard to get some money into contractors that could do it. We got it emptied out, and we're trying to figure out a way to get the tank itself out of there now, but you can see how far away from anything that thing was. Again, I talked about the ocean debris, all the stuff that came off of those piers, the oil spills, that was up in Bayhead. We believe that was actually coming from one of the cars that we eventually found in that area that was washed off the island. A lot of the sand debris that's up in the bay now causing shoaling problems. You can see this is a before and after picture in Manasquan, what happened to the dunes there. But you can see that the houses are still there. So the areas where those dunes weren't at, the houses were in the same condition as those dunes. So they did do their job. Again, all of that sand that came from the dunes and the beach and from around the houses on those islands is out in the water. There's plans now afoot to consider that as part of the debris. And we've got plans that are probably going to come into play pretty shortly to start doing dredging. A lot of difficult discussions with FEMA on dredging. 2 months ago, FEMA said, no, absolutely not. Dredging's not covered, period. We're not getting involved in it. And that's changed, so now we're back considering it as part of the debris. The argument now is what channels will be cleaned up and what won't. And you can see how clogged up some of these places are. This is a comparison. You can see the green there is the southern area down by you guys below Route 72. The orange is in the central and the blue is in the north. The amount of debris that's been recovered, it's pretty obvious where most of it was. We've been doing a lot of work with side scan sonar, just flat out recovery of floating debris. That's after it's been cleaned up. We've got 3 different contractors, Don John in the north, Crowder Gulf in the middle, down to Route 72, and Ashbrit down this way, doing work. I think Ashbrit's mostly been working around Brigantine lately, cleaning up. This is what our side scan sonar looks like. You can see that square thing that's now coming out of the water in that photo. The houses, 3 houses in Mantoloking are gone. The house in Union Beach is gone. We've got 4 more in Cumberland that are going away. Again, FEMA eligibility is the key, and documenting all of these surveys has been a key thing. Everything has to be documented to the T to be able to get reimbursed for all of this. The DOT is in charge of the boating channels. Again, they've got all those mapped out. They've also done a whole separate series of side scan sonar. You can see the documentation that goes along with that sonar